other project.
Indeed.
Right. And I
Um,
have begun recording. Sorry, I was a
okay,
minute late
so
there.
we'll do a roll call then. I'll just go through that again. So Rory Billow, Dab, Vice Chair, just chairing today in honor of Brendan's recusal.
Harry Ingham, Deb.
Steven, you want to go?
Yeah, Stephen Eckert with Dab.
And Brendan Ash on the record with Dab.
And Matthew?
Matthew Scheck-Snyder, Dab.
Okay.
Great. We have quorum. That's good. Can we get a little city action introduction here with all these wonderful faces and black screens?
Yes, my name's Amelia Harvey. I'm the DAB board secretary.
I'm Kalani Pahoa. I'm the board liaison.
I'm Shannon Moeller. I'm a city planner on this project tonight.
And we've got Laura joining from planning board as well. Not sure if she's there or not. There she is. Nice.
Hey, happy to be sitting in for Mark McIntyre from Planning Board tonight. Looking
Thanks for
forward to the
joining
meeting.
us.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
All right, we're going to roll into the rules of decorum. I think, Amelia, this is your court, correct?
Yeah, I'll take the mic. So thanks everyone for joining us tonight. We have a few rules of decorum for public participation at city meetings. I'm going to read through these, and I have a few instructions for the meeting tonight on Zoom. The city has engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations. This vision supports physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and board and commission members, as well as democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. For more information about this vision and the community engagement processes, you can visit our website. The following are examples of rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code and other guidelines that support this vision. These will be upheld during this meeting. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant should make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited. Participants are required to identify themselves using the name they are commonly known by, and individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. Currently, only audio testimony is permitted online. So there will be a couple different opportunities for public participation at this meeting. The chat is disabled in the webinar format, but when we do indicate it's time for participation, you're going to use the raise hand feature to indicate that you'd like to speak. If your Zoom account doesn't currently display your full name, please enter it into the Q&A if you know that you're going to want to speak, and I can change your name in Zoom so that you can be allowed to speak. And then when it is your turn, we will unmute your microphone, and then you're going to have 3 minutes to speak. And there will be a timer that will be displayed that you can see how long you have. To find the raise hand feature, you can hover your mouse over the bottom section of your screen to show the control panel. You can see it here. You could also press Alt-Y if you're on a PC, Option-Y if you're on a Mac, and I don't think we have anyone joining us from the phone tonight, but it would be *9 if you're on the phone. And here's a few other screenshots of where you'll find it. You can also see it in the reactions panel. A few other tips. There's a couple different portions of the meeting tonight that are going to be timed. We do try to stay on track. So there are going to be different screens that you can see. If you look at the very top of your Zoom window, you will see different tabs to see different views. You can see the gallery of panelists. You can see if anyone's sharing a screen, you'll see it there. The slideshow will be up for the remainder of the meeting, just so everyone can keep track of where we're at. And when the meeting is timed, you're going to see a timer in the corner of my screen on this side. And I think it displays a sound too when the timer runs out. So that's my spiel, and we'll move on to the approval of the minutes.
We didn't see any feedback on meeting minutes, so does somebody on the board want to make a motion to approve?
Yeah, I move to approve the minute.
And do we have a second?
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 All right. Minutes have been approved. We will now be moving on to the public participation of tonight's agenda.
Yeah,
Do we have
so
any public participants?
yes, if anyone wants to speak, use your raise hand. Okay. I'm not seeing anyone at this time. Okay. I'm not seeing any raised hands, so I think we can move forward.
Wonderful. Okay, so we're moving on to our discussion topic, the project at 2801 J Road. We've allocated an hour and 15 minutes here. I think we will be starting with a project introduction from the case manager, Shannon Moeller. And afterwards, I think we'll have a applicant presentation where you guys, we really encourage you to limit that to 10 minutes. It can just become, it'll chew into the feedback time otherwise. And then we'll have some questions for you guys. It'll just be clarifying questions, after which we'll open it up for public comment. Anybody who's raising their hand or joining for public comment will have 3 minutes each, and I believe they can pool those. Is that correct, Amelia? If someone wanted to pool multiple 3 minutes among multiple participants?
Or a maximum of 10 minutes.
For a maximum of 10 minutes, which is not a variable of 3, so that's interesting. But and then we'll have our board discussion recommendations and summaries that go along. We've broken down the discussion topics into 2 sort of larger groups, one of which has 2 components. So there's really 3 items that we'll be focused on tonight outside of broader discussion, pending time available. I think with that, we can move into Shannon, if you want to take the floor here and give us a project overview.
All right, great. Thank you so much. So I'll just quickly introduce the project before turning it over to the applicant team. So I'm Shannon Moeller with the City of Boulder Planning Department. So as you know, tonight we're looking at the project at 2801J. This project is a proposal to create a new residential neighborhood with 82 attached homes, including market rate and middle income permanently affordable homes. So this is being reviewed under the site review criteria. It's here at DAB tonight because it was referred by City Council during an earlier process at the concept plan review phase. So as Rory mentioned, we do have slides for the different topics of discussion and for the City Council referral. So that's it for me. So I'm happy to turn it over to our applicant team. We do have Michael Noda with Neo Studio, who can take it away with the applicant presentation.
They're moved and promoted to panelist. So they're loading up right now.
Great. Can you hear us?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to share our presentation. So I'm Michael Noda with Neo Studio. I think Margaret is I don't know if Margaret is on, but Margaret is our developer, and then Lucy is a Neo employee also. So to start off, can you guys see my screen? I think you guys said yes.
Yeah.
You could see that this is a perspective of our J Road project. I think you probably got a little collateral. So right now it's on the corner of J Road and 28th Street. It's a 4.6 acre site. It was annexed in 2025. The current zoning is RMX2, which in terms of the requirement of the unit types, only 50% of the units, or no more than 50% of the units can be of a certain type. So you could have a duplex, a threeplex, a fourplex, but a duplex can't be more than 50% of the units. I think we have 28 buildings. As Shannon said, we have 82 for sale homes. 33 of them are permanently restricted middle income units. The other 49 homes will be kind of the missing middle income housing. It's a combination of 2 and 3 bed, 2-story units, and 2 and 3 and 4 bedroom units. As part of the annexation agreement, and I'm going to quickly go over this, this is the north property line, south property line, east and west. J Road is here. Toward the east and partial north, as per the annexation agreement, we were required to have pitched roofs with buildings no higher than 2 stories. The other request from town staff was along J Road. Could we have some, I guess we'll call it transitional housing that is more urban in fill? So you could see the corner of J and 28th, we have a low slope roof, but it's a more modern appearance. And I know I skipped in front of me. The site plan, again, this is kind of showing the red is a vehicular circulation. So again, 28th Street, J Road. This is our new access point we call Road A. And the one thing that we during the annexation process, I believe, is that the city requested a 30-foot easement to create a collector here. So immediately we lost 30 feet off our property on the east property line. And then on the west, we have a multi-access easement for future multi-use path. So that's what we're showing here. So again, the existing neighborhood to the east, 2-story sloped roofs. The existing neighborhood to the north, the first 4 buildings have a sloped roof. In terms of the overall layout, and this is very, very similar to what was approved during the concept design and the annexation in terms of both vehicular and pedestrian circulation, and including the open space concept. So you could see running east to west, connecting the future multi-use path and all of the units, both permanently restricted middle income, which is buildings 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, and 6, 33 units. And the rest of the for sale products is we have an open space, circular, or kind of a park, linear park running east to west, with 2 larger play areas here off to the west and one in the middle for all of our residents. And then off to the south, we have a green space, again, all connected via walks. And then we also have for the residents a community garden. And I'm going to go back here real quick. You could see community garden, open green lawn space, excuse me, and our linear open space with our parks are all connected via sidewalks. That's kind of the planning aspects of it. Let me make sure I went over that. Central open space. Yep, perfect. Oh, the one other thing is what's really wonderful to create neighborhoods is we have parallel parking for all guests and residents. And we, have some parking, but we spread out all the parking throughout the project. So we don't have one large parking lot for the entire development. We've dispersed the parking throughout the project for use, and again, not to create a sea of asphalt for parking. You could see some renderings again. We've already looked at the overall bird's eye. Again, the western edge, the northern edge. This is a perspective from J Road, again, looking at the more urban concepts. So you could see that it's a little more contemporary. And then looking down here, we actually created another fourplex kind of to break up the gabled roof forms and the shed dormers. So again, this road really, the linear road connects the two, or the styles of architecture, the contemporary urban style architectures shown in this particular rendering. This is buildings 7 through 10, which are these buildings right here. You could see gables and hips and two-story forms adjacent to the existing neighbors. You could see the future pathway here facing west. And then this rendering is basically showing how we broke up a duplex with smaller gable forms and recesses and porches. And one thing that we didn't mention is each one of these units has kind of a fenced-in personal open space for dogs and open porches. So we tried very hard to have personal fenced-in either front or rear yards for each one of these units. This is buildings 1 and 2 facing east. These are 2 stories of our restricted middle income units. Again, this is facing east toward our next door neighbors. Each one of our entrance porches is kind of, we've created a gable roof form, changed the materials, not showing it very well, but we've created a front door with a small front porch and a little fenced in area to, again, create private open space for each one of the units. One thing that all 82 units has a single or double garage. So every unit has a vehicular garage and storage for trash and for bicycles. And these images are basically site sections. Again, this is buildings 3, 4, 5, and 6, 3-story restricted units. And what we try to do here with the architecture and the colors is to use vertical elements. And this time, instead of gables, we use the shed element to again, have complementary architecture, but still provide individual entrances with, again, fenced porches, and use both materials, changes of materials, and bays to, 1, show the entrances, and 2, I don't want to say break down the massing because it's only 3 stories, but to show that we have a base, a middle, and then a sloped roof. You could see the first floor has a minimum of 60% glazing per the requirements of the code. Again, another slide. This basically shows a view looking west down our open space, and you could see one of our little parks with some play area. So we do have 2 areas again with play areas, and then we have a larger open space for grasses for kicking soccers and playing ball.
Oh, Michael, that's 10 minutes right there. If there's any other sort of final thoughts, I think we would allow you
that's
to
10
sort
minutes
of,
already? I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
veered off, but no, Margaret. No. I think my final thought is, lastly, I'm going to go to sheet, is the 2 things I want to say is that the more modern urban feel are both on J Road, and then on the middle between here it is. Oh, yeah. So you could see on the north property line, we created another more transitional building that's a little more urban between 2-story gables and 3-story gables.
Got it. Thank you. Amelia, is your
That's it.
Thank you for that. Amelia's screen, can you scroll through your slides there so I can keep pace with
Oh,
our
you're muted.
allocations?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, can you see my screen if you go to the
Yeah,
tabs
I
at the
can
top?
I
Yeah.
can see it on the other tab.
Yeah.
We're on I just see the 2801, the cover sheet, the J Road.
Yeah, so we just finished with the applicant presentation, so this would be the time for board general clarifying questions.
Oh, there we go. Okay. I'm oriented there. Okay. Does the board have any general clarifying questions?
I do. Southeast corner, is that detention pond?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Not great, but great.
And I'm trying to promote Lucy so she can show the model, but Lucy, if you accept the promotion, that would be helpful. So you'll promote to panelist.
Yeah, and this is Matthew. I have a question on the new right of way easement, the 30-foot right of way on the east side runs north to south. That joins to some existing residential lots further back and northeast of the site. Is that correct?
Yeah, it looks like it's just a couple of maybe 4 or 5 homes up there, 6.
And just because I don't have the site plan in front of me, some of the units face east. So the last row of units on the east face that right of way, and if so, do they have a sort of detached sidewalk relationship to that new right of way?
Yes. Can I grab the screen real quick to show that?
Yep.
So east is to the right. You could see these are our 2 stories. This is our road A. This is the existing neighborhood to the east. There is a detached sidewalk.
I'm sorry, that's not showing for the public.
Yeah,
Oh,
we're
I'm
not,
sorry.
For the
we're
board.
not seeing.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay,
Thank
can you
you.
see it now?
Yep.
Yeah.
North is up, east. So buildings 1 and 2, we do have a detached sidewalk with parallel parking and our new road A.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I just wanted to understand that interface there.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you, Matthew. So this road A, is it a widening of the existing dirt road that accesses the residential homes or properties to the north, or is it independent of and fenced off from?
You know, Roy, because we're calling this a collector, because the town of Boulder wants it as a collector, we dedicated a 30-foot easement as part of it. So I don't believe there's going to be a barrier between here in the future.
So Shannon, is the intent, Shannon, that they're going to widen that road and that all those
To a-
Oh, yeah,
residential-
Shannon, no.
To a typical 60-foot right of way. That's where I'm going with this. Is this 30-foot right of way? Is this half of a right of way for a future expansion?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Because 30 feet does not seem wide enough for 2 lanes of traffic.
No, and it's a dedicated right of way.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to understand really technically how that was going to be laid out.
And it does have a detached sidewalk, tree lawn.
Okay. Thank you.
Roy, I got another clarifying question, and it could be, it's probably a Shannon question. Just trying to understand the annexation agreement and the detention pond. You guys are trying to create an urban condition here, so it's funny that you have requiring urban condition along J Road and the architecture, but yet there's a detention pond on J Road, and why and how the city came
Yeah, I
up with
think that was
because we see this I've seen this all over, and it's really like kind of weird. We're trying to create an urban condition. I mean, there's not a whole lot of detention ponds in urban conditions on that principal street. So I'm just trying to understand that.
So yeah, just to correct the understanding there, the annexation agreement doesn't relate to either the detention pond or the design of the units along the southern edge there. So the site review criteria has criteria that's related to areas of the city where it's transitioning from areas of the county into the city, and it has a site review criteria related to projects that are on a major road. So J and 28th Street are considered a major road, and it's also considered a transition point into the city from the county. So that's
Right.
why the site review criteria is looking for those buildings to create more of an urban edge there.
Okay.
The detention pond is located in that area based on where it can be physically located due to the engineering constraints on the site. So
Grading,
Wow.
probably grading.
Oh,
Low
yeah.
point, right?
It is grading, and all of our storm water is going to go off to the east, and so
Right.
this is the low portion of the site, and
Yeah.
you know,
I can
as
see it. I'm on Google Earth. I can see it.
yeah,
We got to stop doing this as a city. I know this is
So, Stephen,
ship's
just
already
real
sailed,
quick.
but
Real
this
quick
is
though,
important
Stephen.
because this is an urban design condition that we're looking at, and having a detention pond on the principal street, there's other ways to do this.
So
But it's already got this ship already sailed. So I just want to bring that up. It's
We're in the
important.
asking the applicant clarifying question phase,
Yeah.
but then we can opine during
Okay.
our review commentary phase. So
Okay,
please,
great.
I will be cracking the whip tonight, sir.
I had a quick question. The thinking behind having both the alleys and the roads between the buildings is that, could you just expand on why you've got that? Is that a requirement?
I don't want to say it's a hard requirement, but the guideline was to really have the front entrances face the public realm, right? To have a front porch facing the public realm, which is, most of our units, if all our front porches face the public realm, and then we created alleys so that there was no conflict between garages and front porches. Only building 7, this edge here, where our front porches and our garages share the same facade. So what we try to do with the majority of the units is to create a alley for garage access and the front porches off of the streets. Again, so that is kind of the principle, and I'm glad you brought that up. That's a principal guideline of what we wanted to do here, is so that we could have a front yard, front porch, and most of the time we'll have a little fence around here, but that was so that there was no conflict between the pedestrian and the vehicular movements in the front. And only along this road is where we couldn't get that done. And so everywhere else is that we have a private or public walkway off of our front porches.
Laura, you've been patient with your hand up. Would you like
Yeah.
to?
I'm sorry.
Laura
yeah.
has her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no problem whatsoever. I'm very happy to defer to the board members if they have things they want to say or ask. I did want to ask about that Collector Street. My recollection, so I was part of the concept review for this at Planning Board. My recollection is that dirt road off to the east there, that there was some controversy or unsettled questions around whether this project could have access to that. And I was just wanting to ask Shannon how that was resolved. And if the intention is that this half collector is going to be combined with that street, is that a done deal, a sure thing? Would that happen if the properties to the east annex? Like what's the story there?
yeah, that's right. Your recollection is correct. So the property to the east is still in the county. It's not in the city. And so it's we're not able to use that access road to serve this property. So that was what we determined through the annexation agreement, was that this property would need to provide that 30 foot of right of way to provide access for this. So nothing will happen with the 30 feet to the east until or if those folks chose to annex into this city.
Which could be never or soon, or it's an unknown. So this 30-foot right of way is what will serve this project for the foreseeable future unless that property annexes.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I have one other question, just again to refresh my memory. I think there might have been a statement that was a little confusing to me. As I recall, the annexation agreement. So first of all, concept review is not an approval, right? It's feedback. So there was no approved concept review. It was just feedback on the concept presented. And then with the annexation agreement, there was no site plan attached, which is a little bit unusual, but was done in this case. And this is the site review part of that. So the open space pattern, the size of the open space, the position of the open space, the access roads, none of that is spelled out in the annexation agreement, as I recall. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So it's not like there's an approved plan that can't be changed. This is still part of reviewing the concept that's in front of us, the site review that's in front of us.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Laura, because that's sort of a better answer to my question of is this parallel to the dirt road, or is it in combination to? And Matthew, to your point about a 60-foot right of way being more common, maybe that's the intent, it sounds like, being set up for a future annexation, but there's no guarantee that will happen. So I think as far as the review is concerned, it's a dedicated 30-foot right of way for access to this site and through this site. Okay, any other clarifying questions from the board? No. Great. Let's move on to public comment. Do we have any public participants looking to comment?
And if you've joined us and you didn't hear the instructions at the beginning, just a reminder, if you want to speak, raise your hand. Okay, we have Lynn Siegel. I'm going to unmute you and you'll have 3 minutes.
It's a lovely design, but no, we don't need any more housing in Boulder. We can't even begin to touch the infrastructure and the needs and the financial impacts of what we have. I mean, we're talking serious development here. It needs to stop. It's got to stop. And if there's anything, I mean, these people have their land, they can do it by right. God forbid, I'm working hard on the Boulder Valley Comp Plan to keep it shrunk down because we do not need this density. The Colorado River Compact, it's in limbo. The expenses, Alpine Balsam, $250 million. Where's that coming from? Where's all the money coming from for the impact on the roads? I haven't got money for transportation maintenance fee. I haven't got money for the library district, $350 a year. I'm glad for libraries, but we need to find the resources within our already existing funds in the city. And we're making it worse with each one of these developments. Right to left, I can start at one end of town and go to the next, because Laura knows I'm at planning board all the time. And I know every project that's going on. And Sundance and CU South, it's got to stop somewhere. These in good faith, these guys are developing this and they're watching out, and you had good questions back and forth. But I don't approve of one more development in Boulder. This is the most outrageous growth surge this place has ever seen. My dad was here in 1949, and it was too big then, at probably 20,000. So all I can say is think about the impacts. Think about the finances of gas prices going up, Iran war, probably World War III, and build. More people, more population, more impact. I'd love to have great grandkids too. I've only got one grandkid, but we've got to stop. This is just not good. Please think about it. I don't know what you can do. It's not back and forth. Unlike it really should be. You should be able to say, well, then we can't do anything. They have their development. We didn't provide them any subsidies or benefits. But, you know, why can't it be a little back and forth? It can't. And that's the pitiful thing.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thanks.
That is 3 minutes.
All right. Any other public participants?
Mm-hmm.
We don't see any. Can I see them? I don't think I can see any, can I?
I don't think so. Kalani should be able to see them. I don't see any other hands raised. If anyone else wants to speak, raise your hand.
Yeah, no one else in the
All
audience.
right.
No one else at this time.
I feel like I've got a lot of respect for Brendan now. I feel like a pilot. There's just so many screens open and chats and timers and altimeters, and Steven's over there running it. I'm about off topic. Okay.
Not off topic. On
Sorry.
topic.
Wrong part of the agenda. That's all.
Okay. That's
okay.
true.
So we are heading into the board discussion and recommendations portion where we have our allocated time. Perfect. This is so nice, guys. I really like this new format that we're using here. Okay. City council referral. I think we put a minute on this just to remind the board here that this concept plan was referred to us by city council with instruction to, quote, focus on providing feedback on a desirable development. So that's quite loose, but that is what it is. If we move to the next slide. Key issue. So key issue number 1, site design criteria. We've allocated 10 minutes here. Streets are designed to provide parking and avoid parking lots with rear garage access. That was the applicant's self-evaluation. And this is being partially satisfied just based on a handful of the units. And I think Michael pointed them out where they are sharing front access and garage access. And there's some challenges, it looks like, on the site, just having to face outwards with doors and pedestrian access versus vehicular access. So I think, why don't we go through our roll call here? I think this evening, why don't we start with Steven?
Great. You're going to start with me. I mean, in terms of vehicular and parking, and I mean, I think they've done a good job with alleys and hierarchy of streets. I don't see any issue with that. You know, I do want to bring up the site detention. I don't know if that, because it is a site design criteria in my mind. Laura, I'd love to know, and you can answer this in a second, you know, in the initial concept review, I keep seeing this around Boulder where we have on Principal Street site detention. And it's just something that we have to, like, planning board should be aware of this. And you shouldn't be having, like on Broadway, you know, we have site detention. It's ridiculous. And this is the same thing. Eventually, with Area 3 and everything that's going in here, this will be it's going to be a major street. It already is. And so there's an opportunity for them to do units in that spot. And I can make a recommendation, which is just basically flip the site detention with the units to the north. And you can make that grading work. It's, not that far off. And then we're filling in the urban condition on the street wall, which is important in Boulder. We are a city, and we need to have urban design that responds the way a city responds, not a suburban response, which is having site detention everywhere and one feeder street to the main road. But in terms of parking and vehicular circulation, I think you guys have done a good job given the constraints you have. But Laura, I would like to know what planning board's role is in determining where site detention is, and if you guys are thinking about this from an urban design perspective, and this is a perfect example of that.
Rory, would you like me to answer that?
Yeah, please, might as well.
I can't recall in my 4 years of being on planning board that has ever come up of us having something to say about where the detention basins are located. We generally just trust that the engineering has been done and that they're in the proper place. But it's very interesting for me to hear the input from a design professional like yourself of why that might not be the most appropriate place and whether it could be relocated.
Well, I mean, do you see them in Brooklyn or in Portland or no, right? You don't see site detention in the middle of a street, right? They're internal, they're in vaults. There's other ways to do this. And a lot of it has to do with city engineering rules. But anyways, it's something that is on lots of projects. But I just want to bring it up. And I think there is a solution here. Actually, it's not very difficult. And I can talk about that later, I guess.
I think that would be a very helpful role for Deb to play, since you are the design professionals and the architects and people who understand these things. Because planning board mostly deals with like citywide planning issues and site design, but we don't get into like the grading and the architecture as much as you folks do.
Right.
Harriet, would you like to go next?
Sure. I think there was just two comments that I kind of wanted to make. Maybe it's three. Firstly, I really like the use of having street parking rather than the parking lots. I agree. I think that's awesome. I still struggle with the whole road alley, just in terms of how much it feels like there's more pavement than necessary. But more importantly, I struggle with that in terms of people flow when you think of the Type B units on the west side, where if you think of someone coming to visit, let's be honest, we're in America, they're going to drive there. They're going to park somewhere on the street, and then they have to try and find their way around these buildings to the front porch unless they're going through someone's garage. And I've been to units like this. It's a pain. Like, it doesn't feel like you're going in the most obvious way to enter someone's house. You don't have a really good directional flow. You don't know where to go, and it's hard. So that would be my main comment on this whole alley road kind of flow. The other thing that my final comment was, the way that the unit types are, I think you end up with slightly more parking available in front of the B-type units, if I'm right, compared to some of the E units. And I wondered, given that they're a higher density and then you have less parking there, whether there's a way to intermingle some of these units a little bit more to encourage perhaps some diversity between the different building typologies, so it feels more like a neighborhood, but also so that the parking is more evenly balanced, because at the moment it feels like on the west side we have way less density and way more parking, and on the east side we have a lot more density and there is somewhat less parking there. So just a thought. Those are my comments.
Matthew.
Yeah, I think having looked at some of the key issues, I'll sort of table a couple of comments I have that are consistent with what Harriet brought up as it relates to entrances and visibility of entrances and access to the front entrance versus garages. For the street parking lots, I mean, I just offered a general impression is that there's just a lot going on in this site. And I think it is conceivably the most dense plan that you could provide and still prioritize all of these individual parking garages and on-street parking. It really feels like there's not an inch to spare on the site. And that may play well in reality when it's built. It may be cozy, it may be have a nice density and feel to it. I don't doubt that, but I just think one of my concerns is as the design is finalized and moves forward through the next phase of review and approvals, I do think some respect has to be given to the front yards, the virtual setbacks to sidewalks. If something were to happen in the planning and this got a lot more dense, or you had to sacrifice what little sort of private areas there are available, I think that would be a detriment. So, I guess my general thought in summary is there's just a lot of vehicular circulation here. It's really dominant and it's redundant due to the alley loading and insistence on having alley loading. That can be done the right way and it can work well and it can look good, but I don't think any shortcuts should be taken as it pertains to foot traffic circulation, pedestrian circulation.
Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, I think when I looked at this, basically I started at the west units, exactly the ones that Harriet was talking about, where your arrival from a car is a garage door. And then depending on if you're visiting unit 23 or 20, well, maybe not 23, because I do appreciate that there's this sort of green public path that sort of bisects everything from east to west and creates a north and south. And so there's porosity from a pedestrian perspective to help balance some of this vehicular dominant circulation plan. But, if you're visiting one of these 22, 21 units, depending on where you park, it's a big bootleg to walk around and try to find that front door. And I think I heard Michael presenting saying something to the effect of that path that to me is what is relied upon to access these front doors is a future item. So I think I'm confused how you even get to these front doors if that path is a future item. I would actually like if someone could respond to that question. I don't know if Michael or anybody on that team is able to speak right now.
And unmute Michael.
Or Margaret. They both have their hands up right now.
Yeah, I'll let Margaret answer that because but if you're right,
I
did
can
say
answer that.
go for
So
it.
yeah, so right now there's an easement for the multi-use path, but in the meantime, we're putting in a 5-foot sidewalk and a landscaped area with benches to form a sort of linear courtyard, if you will, at the fronts of these homes. If you look at the site plan, you can see that there's a connector from the playground that's a paved pathway to that 5-foot sidewalk, and there are gates. So it is true, if you pull up to one of these units in 20 to 25, you would be coming through the gate to come to the front door if you didn't have someone meeting you, if you weren't coming by bicycle or whatever other, rollerblades, however else you would come on a path. I do just want to point out that we lost 45 feet of width on the site to dedicated easements and right of way right out of the gate. That doesn't include an extra 2 feet here and there where we, for the detached tree lawn and some other things that were beyond the 30-foot right of way on the east that we dedicated. And just to be clear, and respond to one other comment on the parking, we had to have a 30-foot minimum right of way to make these streets public. So there was a big desire to make them public because one of the issues in Holiday with a mixed income neighborhood was just having the restricted housing owners fund their reserves. So in order to try to keep the costs low on the site, we wanted to make the streets public, and I believe the city initially wanted those public as well. So one of the constraints we faced, we lost a row of parking on the east because of that. We had these one-way streets with parking on either side, but we had to give some of that up. One for the detached tree lawns on the collector street. We tried to make that an attached tree lawn with woven in parking, but it was written a specific way in the annexation agreement. So we had to lose that parking. So while I can agree it's not ideal, initially in the very beginning with inclusionary housing, the agreement was we can't do for sale housing here unless we get a certain level of density. It doesn't work. There is no project. It just doesn't. And you guys are architects, you know this. It just, without a certain number of units, it's not viable. So those are some of the constraints. So yeah, we know that the 5-foot sidewalk goes in day one. You have an easement big enough for a full multi-use path there. And you also get benches and landscaping and trees and so forth along that edge to enhance it as a sort of park-like environment for these front yards to face. It is, I agree, not, we're not.
Hey, Margaret, thanks for that additional commentary. We have to just sort of be brief in these question and responses because we're moving through an agenda here that's got time allocation, and I'm blowing it right now.
Understood.
But we'll continue to prompt you as needed. But thank you for some of that additional color. I mean, when I look at this again, like from that perspective, again, a developer-centric perspective, what we're hearing is, how things have been taken away from the developer by easements or width of property, and all of that is this idea that something has been taken away is under the premise that you could have done any of it initially anyways. So I think for me personally, I realize there's a handful of widgets on this site plan, 4 or 5 different unit types, whatever it is. And in order to lay them out from east to west, north to south with some dimensional standards and tolerances that are acceptable for other projects that you've done in the past, this is tight. Removing a row of units makes this less tight. Does it make the project infeasible financially? We aren't here to discuss that today. We're here to discuss the merits of the design. I think that goes back to Matthew's comment of just every inch has been squeezed here. And I think you guys really are at the cusp where these unit types are about to fail to function, both with access, open space, and being nice enough for sale marketable at the density that you're at, given the size and shape of the site with its encumbrances. I guess to sort of wrap up this particular criteria item, there's been provisions for units that have front doors and garage doors facing the same direction, the road. Why would you have chosen to do that in some locations but not others? I guess I would argue, it's a great idea to think your friends are all coming by bike and that the Amazon guy is going to deliver his package by walking through this beautiful tree lawn landscape. But I think to Harriet's point, the reality is we're in a generally car-centric culture still, and this site plan is car-centric. So, I guess I'm confused why we're not seeing more front doors share garage door elevations in order to just create pedestrian circulation from the obvious public right-of-ways. And I appreciate this idea of like turning out to the open space with the quote front doors, but I think it's illogical given this site, and that would actually on the west side be much nicer to me as a prospective buyer as a backyard where I don't have everybody who's walking home with their groceries or arriving on rollerblades, shall it be, going past my backyard. So I think I'll leave that one there. Kalani, remind me, we're not doing summaries per, or we're doing summaries at the end, right?
We would appreciate summaries per because that's what goes to planning board.
Okay. So let's see, summary of
Rory, just one quick thing.
Yeah, please, Stephen. Yeah.
Yeah, looking at the B unit, it's kind of the ones in question that are west facing. It's tricky because we don't want to have backyards facing 28th and J Road, right? But at the same time, you want a street condition inside. One thing you could look at, like you said, is having combined garage and secondary entry, and there is on the sides, they have a window where you could replace it with a person door and put like a little porch element on the corners of those units, and you could have an entry there. Someone could ring a doorbell and they could come back like through the garage basically and let them in. It's not a perfect solution, but it would help, rather than having to walk all the way around. Just a quick thought on that.
Yeah, Laura's hand is up right now as well.
Yeah, I will just say, I think it's very interesting that the maybe best practices in site design and our site review criteria maybe aren't lining up on this particular point, because there is a site review criterion about entrances facing the public realm where there is a defined public realm.
Yeah.
I could quote it for you, but I'd have to find it.
Yeah, the trouble with the public realm here, I think on the west side, and I don't want to belabor this because the next two key issues deal with basically the same thing we're talking about now. So, Rory, maybe we could just summarize this, and then there's more to talk about relevant to the next two key issues.
Yeah, I agree. I think, in summary, I really have so much appreciation for Brendan right now. This is why I've, over my years, never volunteered to be the chair. Okay. Summary. So I think I have our notes here. I mean, Stephen, you talked about the detention pond location. I'm not sure how that gets summarized here, but I think we could just say, comments regarding the detention
looking for is there an alternate location?
So I say comments regarding the detention pond location along a public right of way and primary street.
Correct. Yeah.
This could be relocated to a less prominent location on the site.
Yeah.
Then we had Harriet talking about the walk around units. And I echo that. And I think Matt has made some comment about that and is prepared to make it on the next criteria comments. So I think just a way to summarize this would be to say that current unit typologies have both split vehicle and pedestrian entrances and some shared vehicle and pedestrian entrances, in particular on the west. And is it also, where else does this happen, where we have this garage only facing the roads? Is it the southern units too?
Yeah, I think it's all those.
Yeah,
units.
it's west and south.
It is, but the southern units have a specific relationship to J Road, which the
Right.
west does not.
Yeah,
There's a giant
totally.
empty prairie dog lot between
Yeah.
between 28th and the west.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's why I'm
That's
tabling my
true.
comment. That's my main point is coming up. But I think we shouldn't treat the row of south units and west units in conversation the same, because they're
Understood. Yeah. So I'm going to say current unit typologies have both split vehicle and pedestrian entrances and some shared vehicle and pedestrian entrances, the locations of which should be reviewed at the west edge, where the split entries are challenged by the vehicular access.
I think related to
Matt,
that, Rory, is just the fact that we've got the double alley and road stack, and in a site that constrained, it feels like there's a lot of roadway, and that maybe solving the door garage access might enable some removement of the pavement and maybe give some more breathing room to the site.
So how about generally for a site that is as constrained as this design presents, the potential redundancies between roads and alley access could be made more efficient along with combining vehicle and pedestrian entry facades. How's that? Guys, is that good?
I think so.
All right.
Yeah.
Yep.
On to the next criteria, please. All right, 17 minutes, guys. It was actually 17 and a half that we get on this one, but we already blew through so
All right.
much time, so good luck. Building and site design are consistent with the character established in any adopted plans or guidelines. I'm going to let you all read all that. But basically, the applicant self-evaluation is what I'm always interested in. All 82 units front a public sidewalk and or street. Each unit's garage is accessed via streets or alleys. The partially satisfied comment from staff, individual units generally front onto streets. Some units along the western edge, which to Matt's point we're getting into, have been designed to front onto landscape and sidewalk and a public access easement. Some units at the north edge of the site do not have rear access to an alley, so both garages and front doors face onto the public street. So I think we'll run through our roll call here again. I think the one thing I just wanted to say before Stephen, you jump in and we get through the roll is again, like I appreciated Margaret's sort of backstory on these roads were sized large enough to become public roads. So in a lot of ways, they are the public realm. So the ability to face and front them both with entrances, vehicular or pedestrian, I think that there's a little bit of a loophole there. So, I don't know how that impacts y'all's thinking, but Stephen, if you want to take the floor here.
Yeah, can we go to the it's in the third packet. I don't know what page it is. The B units. It's page A5.
Units. A5. Yep.
A5. I don't know
Yeah,
if that's
which unit is, see, I'm confused. I'm looking at the site plans in DAB part 2 the packet, and it's building numbers without unit types identified.
I thought the B units are the ones that are.
And I'm promoting Michael to be able to present that sheet up.
Where are you guys seeing the A, B, C? Because I'm on DAB packet part 2, which is just building numbers, and that's
I
what
was
I've
on
been
packet 3 it had, because it has the elevations and stuff, and then it.
Got it. But they don't ever tie those to a site plan, those designations. Like,
Thought they
oh,
did.
maybe at the end they do. Anyway, so you're talking about the buildings on the north.
Yes, these are the B ones?
Well, those are A's. B's are the ones to the west, and then there's B's in the middle along road C and E. This is a very.
Which ones are 20, 21, 22? Those are the ones
B. Those are B.
Those are B.
So
Okay.
I'm on sheet 21 of 31 in packet part 3, and that actually is the first time I've seen both numbers of buildings and letter designations on a single plan.
Okay. If you zoom out, so it has the floor plan.
I think Michael's running the show over there.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, this is unit A.
This is unit A. These are the northern units. But you want unit B?
I want 21, 20, the Bs. Yeah, I think it's the next. There we go. There we go. So yeah, it's the same discussion as how can you guys do something? Let me see. I can annotate, right? Yes. Okay. How do we do something with this rear/front, right? And what I was suggesting is you have a window right here. In here, you could do a person door in lieu of a window and look at more of a little corner condition that might mitigate what the kind of issues that we have. That because it's true, if you're in unit 20, you're walking, all the way around to get to the quote unquote front. And your friends will come over, you'll open the garage for them or whatever, but I always think of it in terms of the pizza delivery because I used to do that, and FedEx guy, like, where are they going? And they're gonna hate you. They're gonna walk 100 yards around to get to your unit. Yeah, exactly, like something like that, and even like a little port covering element, and then someone could ring the doorbell and you could go and answer that, right? Anyways, that's just, but I think it's the same issue we were talking about before. This is getting to that, how you really need 2 fronts on those perimeter buildings, and how do you do it? I think is the question.
Harriet, would you like to jump in?
I mean, I don't have anything new to add other than my comment, my counter to Stephen's suggestion is if you're a visitor and there's two front doors, it's really hard to know which one to use. And we've all, and how do you make it really clear? Because some people might not want you traipsing through their garage if you go to visit for the first time. So, yeah, I have concerns about this, but I don't have a solution. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I think it's, again, if you think of like your friend versus the pizza delivery person versus, and how that works.
Yeah, or the fire department or 911 or anybody else in an emergency, right? Like I think that's part of this discussion too.
Yeah.
Matthew.
Yeah. Hey, so I think I'll probably be the most blunt about this. Like, I just think it's weird on the west units to have the front doors facing a multi-mode path. It's weird today. It's weird in the future. It's weird that they're facing a field, which is marginally developable land between the lot and 28.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. I mean, this vehicle circulation is specifically designed to be city street, right? City right of way. And so under no circumstances would we allow a house to be built with nothing but a garage facing a city street anywhere else in town. So what I sort of see is kind of like some of these units taking liberty with, oh, it's just it's urban, it's city, it's facing the street, it's engaged with the sidewalk, and some of the other units like, I'll just turn my back on all that and I'm going to face like open space. So it's just logically inconsistent, and I think that's why we're all a little confused and perplexed about how this is all working cohesively. So to me, the simple solution is I don't understand why these west units aren't facing the new street. Just like it's been solved on the north, some of the north units, where they face a street, there's a garage and a front door. I mean, I know as a residential designer, it's definitely less desirable to have your garage and your front door on the same face. It's challenging for many, many reasons. But I don't think that difficulty is a good excuse for a lot of these units to just sort of turn their back on the new street and put their garage butted up to the sidewalk and say, well, the front door of this faces a multi-mode path. I'll just go a little bit further. I don't think there's anywhere, we've reviewed projects in the past where some student housing has faced multi-mode paths. And we've, public comment generated some resistance to that. Some of our own rationale generated some resistance to that because multimodal paths are somewhat of security issues. They're not the most desirable things to face. It's not like they're facing a street which has some community common surveillance by nature of it being facing other front doors. So I also don't think it's necessarily desirable to have these expensive units having a front door and a path out to a multi-mode path.
Well, Matthew, the other thing is that I just realized the front doors are not on the ground level. So not only do you walk around the unit, but you walk up a flight of stairs to get to the second floor. That's your bedroom.
Well, that's your front door.
Yeah, but into what? That's not living space. You go into bedroom. Yeah. And I mean, you kind of go
an interior. So the stair is an interior stair, right?
Yeah, it's a walk up.
Yeah, I guess
it's all view driven, guys. I mean, these are epic views you can imagine from these units, right?
No, none of that withstanding, and I will commend, like I enjoy the variety. I'm usually one not to enjoy a variety of materials and forms, but like this, I think you guys have handled providing some variety and some visual material themes are nice. and I'm sorry I'm blunt about this, but I just my takeaway, and I'll wrap it up here, is that I don't think I think what's causing um, a lot of the illegibility of what's going on here is because just at a very basic level, the relationship to those west units do not relate to the street. There is never going to be a street on the west side of those units. So based on the city criteria, as to have something relate to a street, it can't just stick its garage back into the street. Where a lot of the rest of the development is making some very thoughtful measures, taking some thoughtful measures to address the new public right of way. And I don't think you can just ignore that on some of the units because it's more convenient or it creates some different kind of unit type.
Well, you get a two-car garage. I mean, that's just why some people do tandem parking in this situation. The other thing is you have the one advantage you do have, Michael, is this is a duplex, so you don't have a middle constrained unit. One of the things, a lot of site design that had like facing south, so you could have north solar orientation. In these kinds of scenarios, you could do side entries. But you would need more space, right? But that could be a way out of this box. If you literally had, because you have a duplex, you're in the middle, you could have side entry on the top and bottom and get yourself out of this box. But yeah, it's definitely something you got to think about.
I think so. I'm just gonna, in full support of Matthew's comments. I think it ties back to Matthew, your earlier comment about there's just not an inch to give on this site. And again, I understand Margaret's backstory as far as this site has been victimized by its easements and right of ways. But on the other hand, it is what it is. And we still need to provide good design. That's not an excuse to provide design that's not going to function well or look nice. So I think straight up, the reason why there's not entries on these is because these units are 19.5 foot wide versus the ones on the north that are 25 foot wide. And those units, you guys have already shown us that you know how to fit a unit that has both the garage door and the entry. You just chose not to put them on the west because those are the view-driven units that are going to sell for top dollar. Let's put more of them in from a development perspective, which I totally understand and appreciate, but it's still got to work. And I think what you're hearing today from this board is we're not buying it. It doesn't work. So I think the Western units, in summary here, need to be redesigned to allow for pedestrian access to engage roadie. Can I just put that in the summary? Is that good for you guys?
Yeah.
Western units as designed do not work with pedestrian access facing west.
I think there's definitely a thoughtful solution that would, not make these look like when you're driving up 28, like the back end of the houses and still have a front on the new street. I think there's a way to do it, and it's not probably that difficult from where you guys are.
I think it's more desirable. I mean, again, I think
exactly.
The concern is you lose unit counts, right? Like to get a wider unit. Because even I appreciate your side-loaded entry, Stephen, but even that is like I don't know, 3.5, 4 foot.
You still need 20. You're going to need more like 20 feet between the units.
Yeah. So, but to not have like a front door and this front porch and this access all sort of mucking up what could be my really nice backyard that has flat iron views. I think these units actually could be spectacular if you enter from the east and eventually arrive at public gathering space that has epic Western views in relationship to a yard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think that's a basic summary there. So let's go to the next key issue. Wherever practical, considering the scope of the project, parking areas are located behind buildings or set back further from the streetscape than the building facade. As far as the applicant's self-evaluation, all residential units have a front entry porch fronting a public street or access easement. Residential units that have front doors and garage doors facing the public realm where the front porch is emphasized. The partially satisfied comment, some units at the north edge of the site do not have rear access to an alley, so both garages and front doors face onto the public street. The design of the front entries is intended to bring the front door as close to the front of the property line as possible. I mean, this is just like episode 3 here, right? So
Right, yeah.
I will let you, Stephen, kick it off.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything else to say. I guess this one is a little confusing. Is it saying now it's saying they, you know, should we have them on the same? I don't know. I mean, it's the same discussion. I think, really looking at how the different users are going to enter these units and where they're coming from, making sure that that's satisfied. I mean, it's the same discussion that we've had.
Yeah. Harriet, anything new to add to this?
I don't know.
No.
I don't think so.
Matthew, anything new to add here? Matthew, did we lose you? I think what I would like to point out here, though, is just the challenge in sort of the contradictory nature that this design team has to look at these criteria, right? And so I understand why they've arrived where they have, because and I think even I don't know who jumped on, Laura jumped on and commented, even based on some of the basic site design preferences of pushing outward facing buildings that engage the public realm. On paper, that all sounds great, but we're going to run into some of these unique conditions, and this site is quite unique. The western edge is not really a public realm. I mean, to Matthew's point, it's a triangle of prairie dog reservoir, and then this whole idea of creating the public realm, because you guys are building all these roads that you're trying to get qualified, you've now sort of you can self-reference yourself. So I think there should just be more clarity to the approach to, if you're going to build all these roads and alleys, that we should pick a scheme for how to access these units and be consistent throughout the neighborhood. And it seems like the scheme that's working is what you're doing on the northern units, which is sharing an entry for the pedestrian and the vehicle. And it's quite common all over town, all different eras of residential development. Since my house was built in the 60s tract developments, my front door is on the same facade as the garage, and we have a cute little neighborhood that functions really nicely from both the pedestrian and vehicular circulation standpoint. So I think in summary, see point 2 above. Is that fair, Kalani? Can I do that?
Yeah, you can
Well,
bundle
and
them.
just one thing, Rory, that came up too, right? Realizing that the affordable units, you have townhomes, right? Internal. And so that by definition, you're picking up space. And then on the perimeter, you've got the more expensive units in their duplexes, but they're only 10 feet or whatever it is apart. And, it's not lost on people that are buying these. I'm not sure that you couldn't go more of a town, row house, put 4 together and free up the site a little bit and accomplish some of the things we've been talking about without losing value to these units. I mean, you can hear it all over, go down to Stapleton. People are like, these houses, why don't they just put them together? They're 10 feet apart. Like, they're not fooling anyone. It's kind of weird. And so there's a lot of that happening here, an effort to make everything a duplex instead of row houses like you have on the affordable ones. So that could help too.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable suggestion. So I think for summary, I'll say discussion has been similar to item number 2, general board consensus to address pedestrian access for western units from Road E. Okay, are we making up time? I doubt it. Let's roll through to the next slide here. Summary recommendation. I think I got through that.
You did not? So yeah, we're actually good on time.
All right, let it stand, Kalani, for the record. All right, so this does open up some discussion, right? Can we use this 17 minutes for general discussion? Because I appreciate that
You can.
staff has directed our attention particularly to these units and how they orient interior, exterior. I think, Stephen, this is absolutely an appropriate time if you wanted to continue on the soapbox about the detention, but I think we captured it, and I have it in
Yeah.
the notes, and I can even
And
break it down.
I could show you real quick.
And can I
what-
ask that as you
Yeah.
do this, if you see a chance to summarize any recommendations that come out of this free skate discussion period,
Yeah.
that you do that?
Yes, I will. I
Thank
will
you.
certainly, yes, be keeping track of this best I can.
Michael, I think you have control, right? If you could go to one of your site plans, that'd be awesome.
I could do that.
Awesome. Maybe like, yeah, there you go.
There we go.
And then kind of cool. Yeah, so all right. I think I can. So like I said, it's not a pet peeve. It's really something that we're starting to see like on Broadway, like the project that Shiny Mountain did up on Broadway. We got a huge urban condition and the whole front is a detention pond, which kind of, the whole idea of stoops and all that stuff goes away. And this is a little similar, and it's just something that I think we got to get a handle on. And I mean, quite frankly, I would put it right here and then fill in this with buildings. And yes, the grade's a little bit different here, but you could definitely make that work. And maybe you can even combine it in here with your garden court path, and making it amenity, not just something that, stuck on the corner. I understand why that happens, but just because I think it's important, and definitely planning board should be looking at this when they get projects like, where is the site detention?
Can I jump in on there and sort of
Yeah.
echo this? One of the things that strikes me about this site, and I want to kind of build off what you're saying about this pond in particular, is how dense it is and how I really like that you have the green spaces and the playgrounds, but I don't know that they're in the best locations, like the retention pond, to make it feel like there is a community space or a bit of breathing in and amongst all these buildings.
Right.
And so if you could move the detention pond somewhere, then it does feel like you might get that. Likewise, the green space in the southwest corner, I feel like that's going to end up being a very underutilized space. It's right on the corner of two busy roads. No one's going to want to have their kids playing there or have it like, line out there with a book because there's going to be cars rushing past. So how do you use the site maybe a little more effectively with the playground and the retention pond that you have to have anyway, and this path and that spot down the bottom to be more efficient? And maybe you could squeeze another unit in that bottom space.
Right. Basically like a spine here, that could start to line up. So that would be, one thing I think.
With you, Stephen, I sort of, again, just trying to follow the order of our meeting here, but
Yeah.
Again, and I think even to some of these issues on the perimeter where we're talking about, clearly they're seeking a duplex sort of market buyer, whatever. We're running into dimensional issues to be able to put pedestrian entrances alongside garage doors, and that's going to be sort of a function of running down this whole west and south perimeter. And then we run into this. That's a big area we could come distribute all along the south and west to give everybody another 5-foot chunk to be able to put a door on it and then locate that elsewhere, which will still come at the cost of a unit, but not necessarily a primary for market unit. So I actually am really in support of this. It begs the question that has the detention pond been located in the most strategic area, not from a civil perspective, like the engineer's like, yep, here's the low spot. Obviously, we'll put the puddle here. But could there be a more creative solution? And I really appreciate what Stephen and Harriet are saying, where it actually helped. Like, you guys know it's a tight site. So like you took your one open area that's required programmatically, a detention space, and you put it on the periphery where it could become a wonderful breathing space in the heart of this development that then, to Stephen's point, makes that pedestrian path feel a little nicer because it's got a big open space next to it. Makes those end units even better because they're now not 5 or 8 or 10 feet from each other. They're 25 or 30 feet from each other. So I actually really think we should include this in the summary here that the relocation of the detention pond should be considered to move it away from the perimeter and primary road / public right-of-way frontage. It could be incorporated into other green spaces or pedestrian areas as an amenity of open space within the development.
Yeah, and then well, my other point was if you started to take these, you got 6 of them here. If you started to combine these into a fourplex, you could get a little more breathing space. But even that said, I mean, when you start getting 18-foot wide, 20-foot wide, these are 19.6. That's why people do tandem parking. Now, people end up never parking both cars in there. It's not ideal, but with tandem parking, you could have an entry on either side. You could rework that floor plan, and make it work. And you'd only have one garage door, on the end, which would be nice. So you could do an alcove and have an entry. So, I think really looking at that, from a cost and market perspective, like I said, just in my experience, when you have 10 feet between buildings, you're not making any more money just because
what's your opinion, or I'm curious the board's opinion. I'm looking at the perspectives in 3D. I mean, we normally are so focused on architectural character,
right,
and massing and material use. And unfortunately, given just the nature of this review and the time allocated, we haven't had a lot of opportunity to comment on it. And I personally I'm just wrapping my head around, initial glimpse, I like the diversity of the unit types. I tend to think if they were intermixed a bit more, that it might read more like a neighborhood instead of different developers picking off different plots within this and each one of them bringing their own scheme to the table. I'm just fundamentally I'm on Google Earth. I'm looking at the context. This idea that the west and south edge need to be an urban infill of character makes zero sense to me. They're across the street to the west is a neighborhood, a single family, low density RL1 or something.
Right.
And to the south is I'm assuming that's still county. I can't even tell, but that's just it's big commercial and farm. And then to the north and east, the urban environment is about 2 miles to the west of this site. I don't understand why we're trying to now create this cute destination that's giving vibes of the stuff that we see off of Arapahoe, Pearl Street, Broadway, student housing. I personally do not think that the quote urban character out here is appropriate.
Right. And that could be, I mean, it's hard because as we get in the future, things are going to change out here for sure. But
the whole west side of 28, you think is going to change?
Well, I mean, once Area 3 and all that starts happening, I mean, we're all going to be shocked in 20 years, I'm sure. But, it's even Holiday, right? That felt dense when it was in, and it's now not that dense relative to.
Even Holiday feels like a single family neighborhood. There's
yeah, exactly, right?
There's nothing in the region.
Well, Holiday, this is just, I could be talked up this, but Holiday really is the closest comp to kind of what this is.
Right.
Yeah.
In density and scale. I mean, this is more dense. But Holiday is the geographic sort of closest comp and in character, I think, to what we're looking at here. And to our point earlier, Holiday does a lot with the public right of way, right? I mean, it creates a walkable public right of way in different ways. But it also has a lot more walk into unit shared court entrances rather than this every unit gets a 2-car, gets a parking garage. It's a similar comp and a very different approach to the vehicular access to each unit.
Right.
Some units just don't have garages in Holiday, right?
Yeah, and that's not good. And I mean, I agree. From a marketability, long-term market, people are still going to have cars in 10 years, okay, 20 years. They're still going to want a garage to put their ski gear. So I'm not saying that that Holiday is the right way and this is the wrong way. But I'm just saying, in terms of sort of scale and density and massing, that's kind of the closest comp that I can see where this would fit, as opposed to this being a purely like urban housing product, right? We're not down at the Transit Village area.
No.
And we're closer to rural zoning, in a way, rural lot zoning, than we are to urban lot zoning.
Laura has her hand up. I'm curious from a planning perspective, your comments, Laura, because I realize this is a function of this like interface zone from county to city. But again, like look at the context physically. Like there is nothing urban about it, anything around here that I don't, unless they're going to tear down entire neighborhoods over the next 20 years, which I don't see that happening.
I was going to ask Shannon. Shannon, if you're still with us, could you clarify the relationship of this property to Area 3?
Yeah, Area 3 is located to the north of this property.
So basically everything. So the east is that in Area 2 to the east? So it's annexable, but hasn't annexed yet.
Yeah.
So to the east is Area 2, which could annex. And when it annexes, if it does, it would get denser. That's almost always a condition of annexation, is that we add additional housing units. And then I think basically everything to the north of this along 36 is, sorry, that's not 36, that's 28th Street.
Yeah.
Everything to the north of this is Area 3, which is slated for, also where the city can have urban growth. And so, Shannon, is that part of the rationale for wanting us to have more of an urban edge character?
There's a site review criteria that it's specifically talking about major streets, which J and 28th are, and it also talks about the transition between an Area 1 property like this and areas that are in, I think it's either 2 or 3. So for clarity, Area 3 does include the properties to the north, as well as about 3 properties to the east of here. And then Area 2 picks up about 3 properties to the east, with other properties in the county further east. So that's what the site review criteria is getting at, is how staff interpreted that was really trying to provide more of a defined edge, along those major streets, as opposed
from
to
a density
suburban
perspective. And I think even to Laura, your point, like to the east, if these things, if these annexations happen, density is part of the, the collateral there, but that's not a character driver. You can have dense gable developments. Like building B looks like a very nice, appropriately scaled, formed use of different materials, some bump outs and things, given the context of Holiday stuff to the west. I mean, if you're coming up 28, you're gonna like see some of that new development from where the Sports Authority was there at
Diagonal Plaza.
Iris. Yeah. And then you're gonna like go through Palo Parkway and all that and like feel like you're getting out of town. And then there's just gonna be this one little hit of these like 6 urban looking buildings, and then you're back going to Lions. Like I think it's very odd. I like the character that they've established for building, other buildings on the site. And I'm not seeing the rationale for this more like flat roof, urban, hip, walk-up unit, infill
Right,
unit.
like this unit here, yeah.
Yeah, like that feels
successful.
much more appropriately scaled, massed, and the character. So I guess that I don't know. Do you guys, can I put something of that?
Can I just ask Shannon one more question from a staff perspective? Would that be appropriate, Rory?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So Shannon, in the beginning of the developer presentation, they talked about this being, I think, RMX. What's the zoning on this?
2.
RMX 2, and having certain distribution of unit types, of different kinds of unit types. Is that part of what's driving the need for a different character along the edge? Or
that's not a character component. That's just size and bedroom count allocation. They don't want to just monotonize something. So having 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom mixes creates diversity of user end groups, families, etc. But the character is irrelevant to that.
Yeah, that's right. There's criteria in the code for the mix of the unit types, the way the character like Rory's talking about could be you know, part of just up for discussion, architectural
Okay,
design.
that's helpful. Thank you. I'll drop off.
I would just say that I think a more sort of rural, agrarian, single family massing and character is appropriate on this site versus the flat roof urban, particularly on the outward facing edge. If there was like a cost thing or it was simpler to build them or you could, get more height or whatever, and so it's driving some density constraint, I think that's a different discussion. And maybe they're located interior on the townhomes, and that allows you just to bang these thing out, and they get wrapped in a more like outward facing single family residential aesthetic.
And
Yeah,
Michael,
how do we do that?
these ones are these tandem parking? Or is
Nope.
that's a two car
Yeah.
as well in the
Yeah.
back?
These are the B's of the alley.
These are the Bs. That's exactly right.
But the alley B's, they're not the Western. Well, they're the same as the Western B's, but that
They're a
perspective
little
was of
different
the alley.
roof condition. Right.
No, I think it's the same. I think it's just it looks great because it has a street in front of it, its front door, which the other one doesn't. The
That's
Western.
right.
Right. Okay.
That's exactly right. The B is a B. So it's again, two-car parking, front porch, and then a balcony off your second floor.
Right.
That would be, yeah. I don't know if anybody. We have 45 seconds. This is amazing. So I'm going to throw that into it. So in the summary of this section, and then we can move on, I'm saying relocation of the detention pond should be considered to move it away from the perimeter and primary road / public right-of-way frontage. It could be incorporated into other green spaces or pedestrian areas as an amenity of open space within the development. And then perimeter. Unit character feels out of place with the flat roof urban aesthetic given the single family context, single family and rural context. Evaluate more of the single family gabled roof forms and massings for these edge units. All right. Can I pull up Amelia's slide here? Thanks for participating. You can now get off the ride. No, I think
I really think you guys are close. I don't think you're that far from making this work. Like, I think it's a needed project for sure.
We nitpick a lot of things depending on where staff puts our attention and how much time we have. And so I think like largely the character has gone somewhat unscathed. So I think we just to complement the team, we realize there's a ton of work here on this project. We hope you'll take the feedback here and have some productive and insightful design evolution when you take it back to planning board or whomever's next in the gauntlet.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we move on to board matters? Is that what happens now, Kalani?
Yeah, that's next. Thank you, applicant team.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
What board matters do we have?
We're here. Well, we just wanted to say thank you to Matthew for 8 years of.
Yeah, here's your camera, Matthew.
Now he's hiding. He's still hiding.
Yeah, I can hear you. And I will be sure to email you all a picture of my face for your screensaver.
It's been 8 long years for you, I'm sure, but we appreciate doing your first session, I think the 3 years, and then volunteering for another 5 years. on the board
Yes.
and being a voice of experience for the reviewers and for staff, and we really appreciate all your time. So thank you. And I'm sure your other
Thank you.
board
And
members have a lot to say. Or
I was just going to say briefly that I was going to keep extending my membership of this DAB as long as you would let me, assuming that one day we'd meet in person again, but that never happened. So
we will have our going away as we did last time. So
Yeah, how
look
do
for
we get
that in
that
the
on the
next couple.
schedule?
We'll send out a query to folks.
Kalani just won't let us meet in person because then she can't cut off our microphones when we go overtime.
And you'll probably get to meet the new DAB person during that. So
Oh, cool.
Who's the new DAB a new DAB member?
yeah, they were appointed
Oh, good.
Oh,
this last council meeting.
I was not paying attention. Do we have 2 appointments?
No, just one.
This one, that's good. Yeah, Matthew, we're gonna miss you. I hope you're going to like Iceland or some Scandinavian country and getting out of Dodge, but that's another discussion.
well, I do like to keep my options open, Steve.
I know.
You're not moving or anything, Matthew, right?
No,
You're just...
I'm starting vicious rumors. He's just got his citizenship at other places, so he could.
Yeah, I mean, it's no concrete plan, Stephen, but thank you for asking. I recommend everyone keep their options open.
Well, hey, if you can get us all EU membership, that's always good to have. But
I read an article the other day that reckoned that New Zealand is the safest place in the world if this war gets bigger. I was like, okay.
Yeah. And we haven't even started talking about aliens yet. That's a whole nother.
Yeah. Well, they're in New Zealand already, so
Yeah. New Zealand is already full of aliens and sheep.
Yeah. But not as many as you'd think. I don't know if this is wildly off topic, but we dropped below 1-to-5 ratio now. There's less than 5 sheep per pupil, which is, well below our high of 20-to-1.
Wow. I hope that's not a harbinger of doom of some kind.
Yeah. I don't know. I think once we get below 2-to-1, it's going to be stressful.
Yeah. There's always stoats. You got lots of stoats, so those will take.
Yeah, well, we didn't used to.
Right.
What else is on board matters? Anything? Or are we like successfully out of here before 6 o'clock?
Yeah,
that's probably good. I'm still cranky that we haven't heard from city council publicly. I'm saying that, and I still feel that way. Because I do think all of us on these boards, we put our time into it, and they should respond to all our letters, and they should honestly meet with every board once during the year. It's not a big deal. I don't know why they don't, but that's just my personal grumpy opinion. Not even grumpy, it just seems to make sense. So,
Kalani, do we have another project next month?
Not so far.
Okay.
So the date let me just check the due dates. It would be, today would have been the day to receive the application for next month.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and we don't see anything, like we won't see the Broadway project again.
Which Broadway one?
The one right next to New Vista.
No, it's a DAB as a one visit. So you can go to planning board, watch the planning board session on it if you're interested to see how your recommendations get folded in.
Yeah, I would be curious. That was an interesting one.
So if you look at you sign up for the planning PNDS newsletter, it goes through and schedule and everything that's on the planning board schedule, and you can see when it's coming through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Brendan, I was complimenting you and basically lamenting the role of chair throughout that entire process. I mean, there were so many windows open in these summaries, and so I really want to extend my appreciation for what you do on a monthly basis here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And you're welcome to step in anytime you want.
I mean, I sort of like for board matters, I've been, debating. I just had a second kid, and so now like this becoming more challenging for me to make these meetings work right now. So Kalani, you and I were talking about like if I needed to make a determination and then fill a seat during this last cycle, I'm gonna try to just see out the rest of my term. I'm gonna do
Okay.
everything I can. So just bear with me if some of these
Okay.
don't work for me.
Yeah.
But I have 2 under 2 at my house, and it is mayhem.
Well, it's good
Just
for
know,
all the
Rory, it
boards.
doesn't get any easier when they get to college either. It's just different. Enjoy
Right.
it now.
I'm really stoked. Free time. So you just don't ever have free time.
Yeah, forget it.
So it is good for all the board members to get some practice, like either as a vice chair. So if at any point you want someone to do the vice chair position,
I think that would be great, actually, because that's one less commitment.
yeah.
And I
And
think now, Brendan, that you're running the ship as if you've been doing it as a veteran. So
Yeah.
I don't know, Stephen or Harriet, if either of you would like to assume the role of the vice chair. Essentially, you just meet on Monday for 30 minutes to
Before
review all this stuff, and that's where we assign the times that we think we're going to allocate to each of these criteria. And it's just sort of a quick planning session. And that's really the only other commitment outside of just running the meeting and assisting Brendan or vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, or take over for when I have to recuse myself in the future.
yeah.
Right. Yes.
And just for the record, I was not I did not feel that I had a conflict of interest in this project. I was frustrated that I was strongly and probably, I think, taking it a step too far, advised to recuse myself on this project. But
Yeah.
so it's unfortunate. But I do understand that my husband is he works on a lot of the projects that we review. So I think it'll be case by case, but point being that if someone does want to take over the vice chair position, this could come up.
You will be the
again.
alternate, and so you could vote on that tonight if Rory, you want.
I would like to offer it up just as
or we can wait till the new board member is seated next month to vote. But typically a new board member is generally not in a vice chair or chair position right in the first year. So
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to step in at some point, Rory, if you wanna.
Or you could do it on if folks want to try it on a kind of a rolling basis.
I feel like, Harriet, are you interested in this at all or no?
I'm okay just being a board member for another wee while.
Great.
I just
So I
feel
think
I was like, wait, I've already been here for a year as well.
I feel like Stephen would be a great vice chair, and I think it'll give you one more forum. You get that
to complain about stuff.
So I would like to, all in favor, trade my position as the vice chair to Stephen on this call here today, just so that I can free up that commitment.
I second that.
All in favor? I
Thank
you, Stephen.
I was gonna say no.
Stephen, you'll be on the list for next month or for our next meeting as the vice chair. You'll get the agenda meeting. It's usually kind of midday.
Okay. Yeah,
Late
my
morning
only thing
to
is that
midday.
I do have I'm learning the guitar and I have lessons at 3:30 in the afternoon.
Oh
on
yeah,
Monday,
it's before that, which usually
Okay,
between
good.
around the noon hour, but
Okay.
for the agenda meeting, it's just the chair and the vice chair and staff, and we go through this agenda that you guys see on the PowerPoint and just assign times and make sure that that all goes together.
I have a ask. Are these slides pulled together on that Monday?
Sometimes after,
Okay.
there's some adjustments made to them. So
if it wasn't too much effort at all, like it would be super helpful to have them in advance. I know we can go through all the different items and figure out what ones they are. But actually, it's really helpful if we get like the way you guys present it is helpful just to make sure that we've thought it through so we can be as concise and on point as possible.
So we can
Yeah.
send these out. It might it may not be until the day of, depending on if we have to make any changes to them. But these are
I don't want to
all,
add extra work to you, and I'm
No,
okay
I
having them in
agree.
draft, but like it would be useful, even if they
I
changed a
agree. As
little.
soon as they're available,
Well-
they could be sent.
and I will say the memo cover page has these summarized already.
It
So
does, but this is really
Yeah.
nice because this is exactly the flow of the discussion.
it is really helpful to have them like this.
Yeah.
Sometimes we are making changes though, so this one was timing wise.
Okay.
We'll send it if we can get it out early. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I think it's super helpful. This was something that Amelia and Kalani and I, I mean, I can't take credit for the slides, but just the portion where it shows like the item that we're discussing and then the city comment, I think is so
amazing.
helpful because
Yeah,
you're not
it's-
going back and forth to the packet and
Yeah.
It's incredible. It just
yeah.
it focuses the discussion. Almost like though to the point where like we got through their criteria. There was a lot of redundant conversation because the criteria all overlapped. And then
Sure.
in my opinion, there was so much more to talk about, like the retention pond, the building character. Like we didn't even get into one of these courtyards and like look at
Right.
the entry and like talk about like, do we actually think that's feels good? Like that's what we do on those big student housing units. We're like inside the perspectives and like feeling them out and stuff. And here,
Right.
so it's just
Well-
sort of interesting that depending on what staff identifies, we basically just get an hour,
Mhm.
and it's where are we going to direct the spotlight?
Well, and I would say it's a criteria based. So part of the struggle here is you could talk about everything under the moon as far as the design review, but not all of that can be provided as a recommendation, right? It's not based
Right.
on any site review criteria. So it's really helpful if, as you're talking, where we do see some of those deficiencies, that you can address those. But in that open period, if there's things that relate to the site review, it's that's where we want to try to tie those back to, because those are what planning board can actually make recommendations on.
Yeah, well,
I mean, Roy,
Yeah,
maybe
everything
we-
else is voluntary for the applicant, whether they take the discussion or not. And so to have a kind of an effective review, we try to guide that towards those criteria.
But I think, Rory, to your point, like if the discussion about the courtyard and the design of some of those interior spaces, it all can be tied to the design criteria. It just
Right.
happens to be
That-
that our focus is different from what the planning staff's focus is. And I think that it doesn't make it any less important. In fact, I think it's adds so much value to the project when you see it from the perspective of the design professional.
I mean,
I
Brandon,
would
maybe
You're
we always
like one
have
of the
like,
most helpful things you can do as a board member is be really familiar with the site review, so that when you do those evaluations, especially on the open discussion, you're able to say these courtyard spaces are directly tied to the quality of the open space criteria. So being able to loop that portion back. So if there's any part of like you wanting to develop your discussion level and how those go, I would say cracking open those criteria and being very, very familiar with
yeah, I
Very
agree.
familiar.
Laura, you have your hand up, but I have a comment too when you're done.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that when an applicant asks for extra height is when they get extra criteria about the courtyard, right? And so
Yeah.
for a project that's not asking for extra height, the criteria are a little bit more abstract about open space. The basic principle is the open space has to meet the needs of the residents and users and visitors.
Right.
But there's a little bit more to it than that. But I just wanted to say that's the reason why you look at it more carefully with a very tall building, like a student housing project, is because they're asking for extra height.
Got it.
So that
Yeah.
triggers extra criteria about the courtyard.
I think we've definitely sort of, through different planning board liaisons, like been educated on how to sort of word things in a way that can be conditioned, because that's essentially what we're trying to do. And it also helps you guys just sort of understand what our perspective is. We're having a retreat still, right, Kalani?
Yeah. And so that's what I was
we all-
going to say is we could this could be one of the retreat topics
I would love if we as a
along,
group
in
went
addition to the
through it.
onboarding with the new member, portion.
I think that would be really useful to actually just use it as like a learning opportunity to high level go through the outline of site
Yeah.
review criteria, and then our board have a discussion about how we could abstract those, and then we have them all in our back pocket if we don't like a facade, and we can pull out some site criteria that loosely allows us to cover it.
Yeah.
That'd be a
Well,
massive tool set.
Because there's
so there'll
times
be like
where,
a pre-planning session. We can put some pre-planning session on topic areas on one of the meetings. If you guys want to hold a meeting next month in April, it could be a pre-planning topic for like that meeting could be all about pre-planning the topics.
I mean,
Just
and that was part of the
agenda.
reason why we are getting the packets earlier. And also part of the reason why we moved the planning meeting to Monday,
Yeah.
so that it gave all of us an opportunity to add items that we felt
right.
needed to be reviewed. It
Or
just
criteria.
takes that or criteria that need to be reviewed. But it just means you have to review the packet earlier.
Yeah, and I
Obviously,
think
I was going to say there's times where most of the time, you're like, we don't feel comfortable, the criteria is not met, or, you're waffling, and then we say, well, it's okay, or not. But there's other times where you guys have said it's okay, and maybe we think it's not okay, right? And we need to bring it up, and we can, right? But what you're saying is we need to tie everything back to,
and just criteria that's not brought up like at
Right.
all. Like that's the challenge, is like there's so much criteria, and you put one of our heads on it and understand it in a way that we can loop in things that we don't like about the design or think need improvement that are outside any criteria that staff has brought to our attention, and we can make that creative connection to then get it conditioned for planning board. Like that's the highest and best use of this board. It's just a lot of effort to get there, and the volunteer nature of this position is challenging. But I do think if we could use our retreat or maybe a planning session, as Kalani, as you suggested, to do a high level like site review focused discussion between internal board members, so we can start to like relate to each other on our interpretations of site review criteria.
Well,
I also don't like when new people come on and their first meeting with us is a project review. I feel like that's very awkward for them. So I think having an opportunity to meet with us and have a more generalized discussion, as opposed to like being put in a lineup on a roll call to have valuable information, that is sort of intimidating, I think.
yeah.
Laura?
If you don't have a meeting scheduled for next month, could you use next month's meeting time?
Yeah,
or something
and
like
I
that?
think we're onboarding someone next month, right?
Yeah, we are onboarding the new member, and so maybe next month is a good time to talk about the topics that briefly go over an outline that you want to talk about, not have to do this. If site review is the thing you want to do at the retreat, not go over the site review individually during next month, but at least put that on the outline for the day and get the agenda settled for the retreat. And then you can also introduce yourself. It's a good informal time to introduce yourself to the new board member. It would basically be an all matters meeting. And we could do an all matters meeting where you talk about, meet the new member, get them, familiar with what the board is like, and then do your outline for your review.
I think that makes sense. Is that something you guys would be into, Brendan?
Yeah.
Okay. We will post, we will do the notification for the meeting, and it'll be just a matters meeting. No design review.
Yeah, I mean, we like the pendulum has swung so far since I've been on this board that it was kind of like the topics were pretty loose. I mean, but they were, generally loosely tied into the guidelines, and then it swung, I think, really far that it's so rigid about what we're supposed to be talking about and what we're reviewing that I've for a while now I've wanted to kind of bring the discussion back to more architectural items, or that we would prioritize, and not just what's been reviewed by the staff. So
Well, and Brandon, along those same lines, I mean, it's like we're sort of figuring it out, but also like proposing new guidelines or things that planning board or city council could start to think about. Like, I'm not being silly about, having detention ponds on major roads, like it is happening, or, places where the height is measured from below the sidewalk. So to do a 2.5 story home, you have to go below the sidewalk. So you go walk down, like these are real urban design conditions. And as Boulder transitions to more urban, like we need to start thinking about them. And so it would be nice to like say, hey, this kind of stuff's coming up. Or like, why do we have fences on Iris and Broadway the whole way? Like, what is that? Like, again, you don't see that in Brooklyn or Portland or right? Kind of ridiculous. And so these questions are things we
Stephen, I
could
think
come
this
up
is
with.
great. I think
Parking
we
lot
should
stuff.
we should use next meeting if we're gonna do an all matters meeting. We just hit time here at 6:05. So let's what do we call this? Parking lot, these ideas? And
Yeah, kind of
and
like things that we, think little design things that we could, propose is like, hey,
Can we still
Yeah,
have
Yeah.
really strict
the-
discussion time limits though? Because otherwise I feel
Yeah,
like
I
we
mean,
could get to the end of the 2 hours and still be talking about the
it's
first thing.
right, sure.
yeah. I mean, yes, totally. I think being respectful of everyone's time is something that we're continuing to try to do. And these marathon ones where we used to have dinners and break them up over 2 reviews and all that sounds like that's all past era.
Yeah.
That we are now a surgical task force that is being brought in to snipe. So, well, thanks everybody for participation tonight. We'll catch up next month
Great
and on
job
the
cheering,
emails.
Rory.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there
Thanks,
anything I do
Ryan.
with this
Thanks, Laura.
summary? Do I email it to somebody?
You're welcome to email it to Amelia and myself, and we can see if that translates over to the minutes. Well,
Okay.
it probably will. And
Yeah, that would be helpful actually. And then if you just make sure to formally adjourn the meeting.
All right. Formally adjourn the meeting.
all right,
Bye,
thank
Matthew.
you.
Right.
Number
Bye,
1 and
Matthew.
2.
Bye,
Bye,
Matthew.
everyone.
Much love, Matthew.
Cheers.
Bye.